Hi, dear listeners, and welcome back to Blush and Bloom, the podcast where we talk about women's health, self care, and everything in between. I'm your host, Gigi, founder of Asale, your space for cycle aware and preventive care. I'm really glad you're here with me on this journey to unpack women's health and highlight the incredible things being built in this space. So let's get into today's episode. Thank you so much, Dr. Sanjana, for joining me on the Blush and Bloom podcast. So, for people we're meeting for the very first time, how do you introduce yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. So, I'm Sanjana. I'm a research scientist by training. I'm originally from India, but now I live in Switzerland. And I'm the co-founder of Miyara Health, and I've been in research and academia for almost 15, 18 years. And then I took the plunge into entrepreneurship and started my women's health platform called Miyara Health.
So, can you tell us a bit more about what the company is about, why you started it, the story behind it?
Sure. So it kind of started with my own personal circumstances. So after the birth of my child, my health started changing and I just felt like very different in my own body. And I just felt very unprepared and unaware of what comes next in my life. And also, like going to healthcare professionals, what I felt was they were either telling me that it was all in my head, I was imagining it, it was just stress, I was too young. And I was like, can this really be? I'm a scientist. I should know what happens for the next phase of my life. And then I realized it was not only me, there were lots of women around me in, similar age and older who had no idea what was coming next. And I think that was kind of the impetus for starting our platform, Miara, where we wanted to bring awareness to, the next phase of life. So there's a lot of focus on women's health when it comes to fertility and pregnancy, but not much about what happens, post that, what happens for the next 2/3 of your life almost. So this is where we wanted to focus on midlife, on perimenopause, menopause. So that's kind of why we started our platform, Miara.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And now I'm going to ask you, how was the process like being able to transition from being a researcher? But you're still a researcher, yes?
No, I'm now full-time entrepreneur.
So, how was that transition like moving from academia into entrepreneurship full time?
It was, I think academia taught me a lot in terms of like building resilience, looking at evidence backed, information, following data, things like that. But when I took the plunge into entrepreneurship, it was like I was literally wading through unknown territory and unknown waters. Because while you had some kind of preparedness on what to look for, entrepreneurship is such a roller coaster. Every day is different. You probably also understand this. So I think in a way, like it was really a plunge that I took. But I keep my, scientific temperament very much alive in what we're building and how we're building Miyara Health. So that really comes in handy. And of course, the resilience that I've built doing a PhD, doing some postdocs, being in academia and research. So those are all like lessons that I bring with me to being a founder as well.
Okay. So my next question is going to be, let's say we have somebody who is running a PhD program right now and they want to take that next step into being a founder. What kind of advice would you give that person?
That's actually very interesting. Follow what you're passionate about, right? Like think about what you're really passionate about. Don't, I mean, it's maybe sounds fancy to be a startup founder and things like that, but actually it's a hell lot of work. I mean, more work than you'll ever imagine. Wearing multiple hats, you probably understand this as well. And but I think if do something that you're really passionate about, then it doesn't feel like you feel happy doing the things that you're
Yeah.
doing. So for me, that's
Yeah.
women's health. For me, that's working in perimenopause and menopause, and impacting women, hopefully, across the board.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I wanted to ask you, what does Miyara mean and why was this the choice of the name for the company?
So my co-founder and I spent multiple, days trying to figure out what we should call the company that we were building. And so we loved the name Miyara, which we later figured out meant also to be wise in Japanese, I think. But the interesting part is it's also a play on the word. I'm from India, and it's also a play on the word me Yara. So Yara actually means friend. So we were like, so we started out being a woman's, wise friend kind of thing. That was kind of our tagline. So it really tied into that whole theme of who do you want on your in your corner, who do you want as your support system, who do you want as your wise friend. So that's pretty much what Miyara is to
Okay.
all women.
That's really sweet. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you made a post on LinkedIn recently about like having your co-founder and you just mentioned her. So how has the collaboration been like? Because there's usually this like understanding between founders that like they say like having a co-founder is like having been in a marriage because there's a lot of things going on with the company. So maybe you could share a bit more about your experience with your co-founder so far.
Yeah, so we've been working together for the last almost 5 years now. We met on LinkedIn through and also through an online magazine called Namaste Switzerland. So shout out to them. So she was in science communication and health communication at that time. And she just wrote an article which she says is not very good, but it ended up, I was thinking about doing something in health, and then I saw something that speaks to me, so I reached out to her not having any expectations, and we built our relationship. That was the start of the relationship with her, in terms of she was excited about what I was thinking of, and we really built it from the ground up together. And she's also a scientist, but she comes from a slightly different discipline. She's a chemical engineer, a postdoc in the US. So she's got, even though we might look similar on profiles, we've got very complementary skills. We attack problems differently. We have, so I think yeah, it's a good complement of skills, and it's really fun building with her as well. So it's, of course, it is like a marriage. We don't always agree on everything, but I think what for us has been really important is that we believe in the mission, we align on that. And I think like the broader vision is the same. So we both are very passionate about what we do. We want to build for women. So I think that kind of drives us and keeps us going even when the days are long and not very fruitful, I would say. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's so cool. Like you have a PhD. Sorry, I'm obsessing with your PhD in biochemistry because that's what I studied. And I'm like, you have a PhD in it. That's so cool. And you're working with a chemical engineer. So my assumption is that aside to the complementary skills, you also have like shared similar interest in science, and then everything is science back, science based because you want this to be like really,
Yes.
really, really.
Yes. So I think that's a good thing and a bad thing. What I've realized is we are very rigorous about, the kind of information we share and the kind of, but then it also kind of slows us down as being founders. So it's okay in a way to be imperfect and then, help, build on that skills. I think our broader vision of saying science backed and evidence backed is part of our DNA now. So I'm hoping that does pay off in the long run, because, at the end of the there's so much it as well. There's so much misinformation. There's so much like noise out there. So we hope that, platforms like yours and platforms like ours and these conversations will kind of, make sure that we cut out all the noise and actually give women real information and real solutions that can impact their lives.
I agree 100% because, as you said, there's a lot of misinformation. And even though, like, with the internet, there's a lot of good information on it, on like, I learned about more about menopause from Instagram than anywhere else. And then eventually, I started like talking to women like you who are actually building in this space to
Yeah.
understand it better. So it's wonderful that we have all these spaces who are talking about these topics openly. And at the same time, we have people who are sharing very weird stuff. So I think 100% that women's health platforms should be as rigorous as possible, even though they may say that science slows things down, but it's healthcare. I don't think it's supposed to be like super fast all the time.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. So now let's talk about menopause. What do you think women should know about menopause and perimenopause that they often don't know? Because something I did learn from somebody else who I can't wait to do a podcast episode with her is that a lot of women get into perimenopause from 30. And I was like,
I think that is the biggest like shocker. I mean, we always go into like, conferences and conversations and we shock women all the time by starting with this fact that perimenopause can start in your 30s, and it does for a lot of women. It also depends on your ethnicity, right? So for South Asian women, we actually go through menopause a couple of years earlier than, the global average is 51, and South Asian women go through it between 46 to 48. So that's when your periods stop. So imagine perimenopause, which is 5 to 10 years earlier, can most definitely start in your mid 30s. And there are different, so depending on the ethnicity, you can have different range of symptoms. You can have different like things that work, things that don't work. So there's a lot of data which is still needed in this space, which we don't know. There are a lot of unknowns. But definitely one of the main things is don't dismiss symptoms that already start in your, mid 30s. It might not all be perimenopause. That's also something to, you know about, but it could be. And it's not the end of the world. There are things that you can do to help, manage this and support yourself and get the right information.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then my next question is going to be, what advice do you have for women who have acknowledged these symptoms, but they are trying, like in your situation from earlier that you talked about, where you're experiencing this, you understand that something is happening here, and you go to a doctor and they're telling you that it's all in your head or it's normal. So how can women better advocate for themselves in situations like this?
I think first it starts with understanding what's normal for you and what's not normal for you. So tracking your symptoms for a few weeks, for a few months, start with that period tracking, symptom tracking. It's your biggest tool. Your body is your, why should you suffer through different things? You need to understand what is normal for you and what's normal for, what's not normal. And with that clarity, you can have better conversations with people around you, whether it's your partner, whether it's your healthcare provider, whether it's, your employer. So these are the kind of things that can really help you and empower you to take that conversation next. Then look for evidence-backed platforms. Really, this is going to be one of the most important journeys, and you're going to spend the next 30, 40 years, in perimenopause and post-menopause as well. So you want to be healthy. And I think this came out in one of your previous podcasts as well, that women live longer than men, but their health quality is very poor post menopause. So perimenopause and menopause is a window of opportunity that you have in your, that you can correct the things that you've been doing, badly. For example, sleep, example, stress management, for example, exercise. And we're all not perfect, but this is the point, is a window of opportunity. So if you want to lift your grandchildren at 80 or whatever, or carry your own bags, do something else, or not have a fall and, have it be critical. This is the time to start acting on that. So I think those are, I might have digressed, but I think these are the important things that can empower you to take the next step in their life. And I feel like there's so much silence and taboo and stigma still around this topic. Maybe we are some of the, the 2% or the 3% who actually know what's happening. Even just today, I just read a study of almost 90% of women have no idea what they're going through. And this is a disservice to women everywhere, that we don't know what's happening to our bodies. We're never taught about, first of all, we're never taught about sex education and menstruation and stuff. Maybe it's getting better nowadays, but when I was younger, we barely talked about it. It was hidden. And now maybe there's a little bit more conversation because of social media, but it's still lacking. How many people have access to the right information? So I think these are all critical things to empower a woman and to learn what steps to take for their health.
When you said about like sex education is not taught in schools, it just reminded me that I remember I was not even sexually active at the time, but like I was reading a biography or a book by, I think it was Rachel Hollis, but now she's controversial now, but like she wrote a book, and then she said that one of the things that she didn't know as an adult to do is that you need to pee after having sex. And I was like, and it just like registered, and I never forgot. So like that is like another huge way to learn about sex education.
I mean, it's like, where do we find that information? Where do we find the right information? There's like no conversation. So even when we talk about perimenopause and menopause, there's no one, no, my mom never spoke to me about her experience. I mean, I don't blame her, but there is such a culture of silence. And it's like,
Yeah.
after your reproductive years, you're just like not important anymore when you when you clearly are.
Yeah.
So I think there's so much to learn, so much to like know about, and are we giving women the right information? So that's all stakeholders, even the men, right? They need to be involved in the conversation as well.
Because they have daughters and sisters
Yeah,
and mom.
exactly. People who go through this. And I read this yesterday or day before. Somebody had posted this. Um, I mean, perimenopause and menopause is not optional. So why should support be optional during
Mm,
this phase? Like, right? Because whether it comes from your employer, from your partner, or your wherever your insurance, your healthcare provider, or platforms like us, why is it optional to get the support? You should have a right to get the support that you
mhm.
need.
I agree 100%. And I really love that the work that you're doing, the educational aspect of building in women's health. Because aside building out the product, you also have to educate the women who are using your product on how they can be using it to the best of its capabilities,
Exactly.
what they should know that they typically don't. So yeah, it's fun. And also speaking of, we talked a bit about how there's a lot of like good information and how there's a lot of weird things happening. So for the average person who may not be able to discern, because I'm saying the average person, even I sometimes it's difficult. So for someone like me, Gen Z, who is out there looking through the internet for information, what advice would you have as a founder for somebody who is like, okay, how can they discern that this is good factual based information over somebody who just has a lot of charisma?
Yeah, it's tough because now with the advent of AI and everything, it's going to even get tougher, right? So I
Yeah.
would say look for the credentials of the person for sure. How opinionated they are, like are they willing to look at the data? Because science, as you probably know and I know, is all gray areas. It's not 100% anything, right? So are they able to like look through that and say like I don't have 100% answer for this, but this is what, 9 out of 10 papers say, or this is what the 9 out of 10 statistics say about this particular thing. But I think, health is going to get more and more personalized over time. And I think that's a good thing because what works for me will not necessarily work for you. And you might come with a certain family history. I will have a different family history and I need to be treated differently from you. So if I'm taking hormone therapy, for example, it might work completely differently in me. And we don't have the data to say what is good and what is bad. But I'm hoping that technology can help bridge this divide of, what is good, what is bad for you and for me, and people like
Mhm.
us, because most of the data out there is for, Caucasian population. So I'm really hoping that the next phase of, health is focused on, people who don't look a certain way and different types of people, different groups of people. But coming back to your question about whom to trust, I think you need to dig a little bit deeper than the superficial.
Yeah, I think another advice
It'll be difficult.
I agree 100%. I think another advice someone gave me was like, don't always look for the most flashy looking person. That sometimes the people
Yeah,
who
someone
actually, well,
the speaks the best might not be the person you should trust with your health and your health information. Yeah.
yeah,
So something to
yeah,
think about.
something to think about for sure. And I had a conversation with somebody as well. She's a doctor, and we were
Yeah.
talking about how, like you said, for example, how I may react to things because I'm a black woman, I'm an African woman, and you're Indian. And she was also talking about like another thing that people aren't even looking into is this like globalization aspect where we're having a lot of mixed race babies that are mixing all of these components together. So we never really know.
Absolutely. I have a mixed race son. So, I mean, I really think that we need definitely more data on all these kind of things.
Yeah.
Because I don't live in India anymore. So I've
Mm.
like, I grew up there, but I don't live there anymore. So how has that impacted my health and, my, the rest of my life? How is that going to impact my perimenopause and menopause, for example? So, yeah, a lot of unknowns.
How do you see culture, language, and workplace norms shape how women experience and talk about menopause? We did talk about this a little bit already, but then let's say, like, for example, you do a lot of work on menopause, and it's also subject to cultural context. So how are you able to present this to people who would prefer not to talk about this at all? Because I'm supposing that the way you approach client base in India will be different from
Switzerland.
Yes.
Now that's actually a great question because I like to invite all stakeholders to at least our first conversation about menopause. So it's like a sensitization workshop kind of thing because it's so important to include everyone because it's not something that affects a niche group of people or something like that. All women will go through it, as I said. So that's the first thing, right? So I don't like so all genders are invited to our conversations because I want everyone to be on the same page. Then culturally, we have to be sensitive about what is allowed in certain workplaces, what is not allowed. We try to maintain that, and me being from a different culture kind of helps in that sense because I understand. I have traversed different cultures. I'm from India, I live in Europe. I have an understanding of different religions, different sensitivities, things like that. So we try to be as sensitive as possible to the topic while promoting the awareness around this. For example, the point about different ethnicities having different kinds of symptoms, going through it earlier, later. So these are things that we bring up into these conversations, these nuanced things about symptom management, which might be different for someone, somewhere else versus who does, or someone who doesn't have access to these solutions. So we think about all those things when we're preparing for these workplace conversations. But I still think a lot of workplaces are not ready for this conversation yet. There's still a lot of stigma, silence around it. Women are suffering silently. They're quitting their jobs. As we've seen global statistics about loss of productivity during this life stage. So, like they're just quitting their jobs because of not getting adequate support. I mean, I think this is workplaces need to start waking up and acting now. You don't want to lose like your most trusted employee who's been with the company for 25 years because you didn't support them the right way. Yes, I think also thinking about it as because like I live in Europe, but yeah, I might have a completely different experience from my colleague who's not from Spain or somewhere else. So just knowing that these nuances exist and making people aware of it is so important. So yeah, hopefully we're going in the right direction in terms of education and awareness as well.
Thank you so much. And then my next question is going to be, so what is a misconception about menopause that you would like to see get retired?
One is the age thing. I think we already mentioned how early you can go through it. But the other thing is that the different ethnicities go through it at different ages. So I think that's another misconception. And the other thing I would say is that hot flashes is not the only symptom of menopause. So just because you're not experiencing hot flashes doesn't mean you're not going through perimenopause and menopause. There are over, I don't know, now they say 80, but I don't think it's around 50, 60 different symptoms of perimenopause that women can experience. So it's not just one thing. And just because your mother or someone else in your family found it easy and didn't talk about it doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about it and get support. So you don't have to endure it. You can seek support, and it's okay to seek support, and there is support available.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So I have 3 final questions for you. So what's one thing that you want a woman who's listening to this podcast to walk away with out of everything we've discussed? Like, what's one thing you don't want her to forget?
That you matter, you deserve support, you deserve clarity about your health, and you don't have to wait till symptoms are unmanageable. There's no too early or too late to seek support and help. And I think take time for yourself. Don't, I mean, I know as all women do generally kind of get caught up in the whole, get caught up in life and forget about themselves. So do prioritize yourself and yeah, and that'll be better for you, your health, and for everyone around you as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And now, my favorite question in the whole podcast, which is, what would you tell 15-year-old you?
My God. I had very low self esteem when I was 15. Probably a lot of other girls and women can relate. And I had no confidence. I didn't think my voice mattered. And actually, now I would tell that 15-year-old, your voice does matter. You matter. You are good enough. You'll be surprised what you end up doing in your 40s. So more power to you.
That is why I asked this question, because it's so cool to like reflect and go all the way back. So thank you for that. And now my final question is going to be for listeners who want to learn more about you, connect with you, and also to try out Miyara, or maybe they want to be like one of the 1,000 founding women. Where can they learn more about everything?
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. So we just launched the Miyara app about 2.5 weeks ago. So it is a digital companion for perimenopause and menopause support. It will help answer your questions in a safe, like, evidence-backed way with our companion. There are tools to track your symptoms, get symptom insights, and connect with experts or do self-guided programs. Whatever you need, validate your symptoms. That's also very important. And we want to co-create with women, like listening to this podcast, everywhere in the world. And we've started this 1,000 founding women of Miyara. So we want 1,000 women, to come together, build with us, join the movement of like advancing women's health for everyone, so that everybody feels supported, give more women access to it. So I'm inviting everybody to join, and you can find more information about this on our website, miyarahealth.com. You can download our mobile app on Android and iOS. You can find me on LinkedIn with my name. Um, and you can follow us on Instagram, Miyara_women, or Miyara Health on LinkedIn as well. So, happy to interact with more people, spread the information that we're sharing, and yeah, hopefully make an impact.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'll include the links to everything in the show notes and in the description. So
Great.
thank you so much, Dr. Sanjana, for joining me on this podcast. It's been wonderful speaking with you about all the incredible things that you're doing for women's health.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for a great platform that you're also building.
Thank you. Hi again. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Blush and Bloom. I'm so glad you joined me for this conversation. If you found it helpful, please share this episode with a friend or someone who might need it. Let's keep talking about women's health and working towards better outcomes for all of us. You can find more episodes and resources at www.asale.tech and check out our app at www.asale.health. And you can follow us for more updates on Instagram at asale.tech. Until next time, I'll see you in the next episode. Take care and bye bye.